How are you guys so awesome?
All the cheeseburgers, man.
I steal my burn. I don't know where she got it from. I'm just like stealing it from her. I mean, for me, I have 3 older brothers and a mom and a dad, and we're all very, very much what you would call a character, I guess. And just from a really early age, I was always really, really confident about who I was because of the way that my family acted and the way that they treated me, and they also just kind of instilled in me like a sense of identity. I always kind of knew who I was this entire time, and like I owe a lot of it to my brothers and my mom and my dad, and this level of respect that we kind of always mutually have for each other. Yeah, I know. Ain't that cute?
Yeah. I have 2 questions. The first question is, like, when you guys are talking about institutions in your poetry, because I'm taking a writing class right now in poetry, and how do you think spoken word is different from, like, contemporary, like, conservative, old school poetry, like, the structure of it?
I'll answer this first because your answer is going to be better. But I think that I think it's like comparing like musicals and straight plays. They're different heads of the same beast, but as genres, they're not trying to accomplish the same things. It's a very, very different medium to try and write something on the page than it is to try and perform something. And I think there are very, very few people that are like truly excellent at both. Usually people are better at one than the other because even though they're both poetry, there's just different language that you use and different rhythm and meter than you would probably use if you were just trying to lay it out on the page.
I don't know, man. That was a pretty good answer. I mean, I think that's entirely right. Both page poetry and stage poetry, they're accomplishing different things, and they have literally different audiences. I mean, with the page poem, obviously, the reader is right there. They can lull over it every time, and they can like still reread it and reread it. When you're doing a slam poem, you're essentially doing it to a group of people that you don't really know, and they don't know who you are. And you have 3 minutes to convince them on a topic, but not make it too inaccessible that they won't get it, but still make it exciting enough and still creative enough where you can reach that level of poetics where you're using that elevated language. And it is just very much 2 schools of thought and 2 things that go hand in hand together that don't necessarily accomplish the same things, but are very much the same thing. And you had a second?
Yes, I did. Okay. So you 2 are beautiful people. So how did 2 beautiful people like you 2 meet each other?
Tinder.
Tweet that. Now my mom's gonna Google me and be like, "Why did you lie to me about how you met?" We met at the Portland Poetry Slam. We met in poetry.
Yeah, that's actually the real answer. But no, so that one of Clementine's poem, Mouthful of Forever, is like while we were on tour, a lot of couples came up. It was just like we read that poem to each other like before our vows. It means so much to us. And I realized that Clementine's poetry is very beautiful and elegant, and my poetry will never be read before a ceremony because they show a sperm donation and fuck you right. And into things like Tinder. So no, we met at the Portland Poetry Slam, and we became friends. We started working together as colleagues and as creative types, and then we just kept hanging out with each other and realized how compatible we were, both in like personal interest and business. And it's a really rare thing, and I feel incredibly lucky every day to have found some of that good shit. Like.
What are you guys' astrological signs?
This is my second show in 2 days, and I got asked that last night too, but I've never been asked that before. I'm a Sagittarius.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are.
You guys know your moon? What?
Your moon sign?
I was born on December 10th in Alameda at like 7 o'clock. That's all I know.
Figure it out.
Yeah, I know those are the things you need to know, but I can't tell you.
Obviously your poetry is quite personal, so like has
just doing it once and getting off stage and being like, I just went deep into the emotional life of a person that I used to be and I'm very much not anymore, and felt dishonest, and it also felt like emotionally draining in a way that I didn't want to. And so there are definitely poems I don't do anymore, some because they're bad and some because they're draining or they're not who I am. And there's also now when I'm on tour or when I'm in a situation where I'm going to be doing the same poems or when I'm going to be doing performing night after night, I tend to not do the most personal poems. I tend to do poems in which I use second person, and I tend to do poems that are about things I believe in, but not about my own life, and poems in which there's a victory at the end. Poems in which there's not a lot of vulnerability, because it's not something that I can't do every night and every night.
There's one poem. I usually do it on special requests, but I don't like doing it anymore because once again, it's not like who I was anymore. And it's times I've been mistaken for a girl. I don't like doing that poem as much anymore because I wrote that when I was 18 and when I was filled with a lot of angst, and it kind of throws my parents under the bus, and we've like crossed that bridge already. We've crossed that bridge and burned it, so we're like never going back there anymore. We're only continuing forward. And so I don't perform that poem as much anymore, but whenever someone does ask, like we kind of understand that poems, once we like put them out in the world, they have their own life, and we have to respect that. And I just read this great quote from Thomas King from one of his books. He says, the neglect of stories is as powerful as an agent as fire or war. So I very feel like even if this is just your story today, and it might not be your story tomorrow, it still was your story today. It still kind of encapsulates, and it's still the world that you inhabited, and you should respect that this is who you were before. And you can always come back to edit it, or add an addendum, or just like give a little bit like, yeah, I wrote this when I was 18, I was kind of a shitty teenager, and I thought I hated my parents, but then I actually talked to them like human beings, and it turns out they're cool.
Okay, first, I just want to say, like, this is the first time that I've been to one of these things, and you guys, and uncultivated rabbits over there, it's been, like, it's a new experience for me. And I just want a little blip, like, you guys have such a gift to be able to say so much in so little words. So going off of that, I was wondering if each of you could summarize in one word what your poems mean to you.
So we got Hemingway up in this there is, can I do a preamble to the word?
You can get back to me later if you want.
I know exactly. It's light, but light spelled with, it's Lighghigt.
Okay, now you need to do
Okay, so I can't ever pronounce his name, but I think he's a poet. His name is like Aram something, but he does a lot of concrete poetry and visual poetry, and his poem was called Light, and it's just one word on the page and spelled Lighghigt, and he feels like that's how light should look like, and that's how he embodies the word light. It's also like a dope-ass poem. It's one word, it's just like, it's so pretty. I just, it's on that William Carlos Williams shit, man.
There's a lot of things I mean, in one word it would be like sharing. If you make the choice to be a professional and to kind of actively attempt to be a professional writer, and to kind of actively attempt to like find your audience, that's very much about saying what your life is like and finding other people who kind of echo that. For me, a lot of what that's been.
This is actually my first time here. It's my little brother brought me, and I didn't even know.
Little bro.
Little brother. I'm not even in college.
Don't worry, I got my older brothers to this too. So.
I didn't even know that this subculture existed
start and how did you get into it? Do you want me to go first? So back in the day, when I was in middle school, I wanted to be a hip hop. I wanted to be a hip hop artist. So I was a rapper for a long time, and then I still dabble a little bit. But so I was a rapper, and then in high school I started doing a lot of acting and speaking debate. So I did a lot of performance, and I still did a lot of hip hop shows and stuff. And I wanted to practice one of my raps a cappella on an open mic, which just happened to be the Portland Poetry Slam. And then I stuck around and was like, oh my god, this is amazing. And I was 17. This was between my junior and senior year in the summer. And this was like just a really, really amazing art form that I was witnessing. And I stuck around for like now, and 4 years later, I guess I am here now.
I started a blog that started doing pretty well, and I was able to quit my job and do this poetry blog full time. And the Portland Poetry Slam was the only like writing community that I knew about in Portland that was meeting so frequently and generating so much new work. And so I got involved there to just try to find a community of writers and brought spoken word into my writing just through good influences.
Yeah. You guys did a lot of pieces tonight. Which one was your favorite or most closely related to you?
Of the ones we did tonight.
Yeah.
I really like the poem I wrote for my dad. That like. I really like the poem I wrote for my dad. I feel like that was cute. Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Sorry to push on that. I like the poem I wrote for my dad. I feel like it was. It's just, I mean, personally, it means a lot to me. I really, really like her teenage girls. I feel like speaking of sharing, if I had one poem that I really wanted to like, if I died, that would be the one that I wanted to be remembered by, because it's the most, the thing that if I could do anything useful, I would like to have that message be the one that I have.
I mean, it's such a cop-out answer, but like every one of my poems is my favorite for a specific reason. I feel like What Kind of Asian Are You obviously is like the one that has influenced a lot of people the most and has helped me the most as a writer to understand like how I feel about these big overarching. What Kind of Asian Are You has a very special place in my heart because before that poem, I wrote that poem maybe 2 years into my career, and I had never done a poem about race, or at least I've done a good poem about race. I never thought that I was good enough at writing, or I was a good enough performer, or I was smart enough to talk about it, or I just felt like everyone has already said something about race, and why I'm not necessary in this conversation. But I then realized that like What Kind of Asian Are You is very much all the things that are my individual experience, and I realized that everything has been spoken about, but it hasn't been spoken about from my perspective here. It hasn't been spoken from your perspective or your perspective. And that understanding of like, even though you can talk about the same things, it's still yours because it's you talking about that. And What Kind of Asian Are You like showed me that like the more honest and genuine I am about my poetry and really leaning into the things that make me who I am, the better I feel about my poetry. But I also just wrote a poem called Letters to My Father, and it's from the perspective of Ash Ketchum, and I'm really upset. But it's also the poem I just wrote, so like, you know, our favorites will like, you know, change all the time. So.
Can you perform it?
Maybe later. I want to answer some more questions.
So this question is kind of about how you transitioned from, or I don't know about transition, but between your spoken word poetry and your books. So I know that spoken word is like longer and you know it's more performance based. How was it going between the two, or like adjusting, say, your spoken word poetry for the page, or vice versa? That whole experience.
Most of the poems I did tonight. A lot of the poems I did tonight are in the book, and if you buy it, you'll see like the version in the book is a little different because I know that you have more time to read it. it's kind of a matter of, like, I know very well what a poem needs to be in order to have it jump off the page. And I'm learning, Alex is much better at it, but I'm learning what a poem needs to be in order for it to be effective when you're saying it to an audience and they only have 3 minutes to grasp it. On the page, you're focusing on layout, you're trying to say it in as few words as possible, you're trying to avoid repetition. You're very, very much focusing on language and the way the thing looks. And in slam, you're often trying to be much more conversational, and you're trying to be almost lyrical. And repetition is kind of encouraged.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, they're just kind of different things.
yeah, like we said earlier, they are just the two different heads of the same beast. Where it's like with the page with the poem on the page, with like it's very much you are crafting a world, but this world will never disappear. It will always be in the reader's hands. And when you're on stage, you're crafting a world that can only last for 3 minutes. And if you're only doing that for 3 minutes, then how do you make that effective versus having a world that's permanent in your hands forever that you can reread over and over and over again?
I hate to be that guy, but one more question.
No, I mean, we still have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Two more is fine.
2 more is fine. We have 3 hands up. We can 3.
3 more is fine.
Yeah.
Was it you? Was it you?
So obviously, artists have some, things they have to overcome personally. So, how, if you're going through something, how do you see the light at the end? And what keeps you going positive for what you want?
Writing helps me a lot, honestly. I mean, it really does. I think I write a lot. I get a lot of emails from people like congratulating me on how broken I am, and people being like, I can't, like I get a lot of these people being like, I've read your